Hello, today I'd like to show you how I created some glass dome effects in Inkscape because I needed them and I couldn't find anything that did showcase how that could be done, so I made my own and I decided to share this. There are a couple of reasons why you might want to make a glass effect. I've shown a couple examples here. We have a simple it's a round shape, and at the edge you see the kind of refractions around, which might be what you want, or it could be something more elaborate, like you see some reflections here on the corners, or not corners, but the edges there. Or you can even go without the corner reflection and just use some mild glares. And you can of course combine the effects into all sorts of different reflections to give the appearance of a glass surface or a dome kind of covering something up. So I just want to quickly showcase how I made these and how you might use similar effects for your own projects. So first off, I just want to get a simple circle, and it works best with a darker background, so I'm just going to make this black. Here we have a circle, and I want to create some glass-like effect above it. And to do that, I create another circle. I duplicate this one, make it white, shrink it down slightly, just so I have that edge around so I can see what I'm doing. And the first simplest technique is just to take this. There's no transparency here, it's completely opaque. I want to open up my fill menu, and I want to give it a radiant gradient, and the default one is opaque in the middle and then transparent in the at the edge. And I want to reverse that by clicking this button here, and we already have kind of what we're going for here. This might be what you're looking for, but it's still pretty opaque. So I'm just taking this transparent stop and bringing it out until it's kind of where I want. And this might be enough for you. This might be where you want it. You could also take the other stop and make it a little more transparent until you get the effect you want. So this could be the glass dome that you want. Um, so that's the first step, you could say, if that's what you want. Another example, I can just duplicate, drag over both of these, duplicate them, drag them down a bit. The second example is honestly probably the most convincing one. If we keep the shape we already have with the edges there, we can just duplicate the similar circle, make it completely white, and then I want to put a mesh gradient on top of this so I can control where I get these little glares and reflections. I can control where and how big. And to do that, I use the gradient tool over here, create and edit meshes. And at the menu at the top, you have different options. I use the conical one because I'm using a round shape. And depending on how much control you want, you increase the rows and columns. 6 or 8 for each of these would be the minimum, I think. But the more nodes you create using these, the more control you have. I'm just going to go with 8 by 8, and the way I actually apply this is while this menu is active, while this tool is active, I just click and drag into the shape, and I get this black and white default. Um, Lots of nodes here I can control. So first off, I'm just going to wipe all color so it's completely transparent. So I drag over all the nodes and I just click the X to remove all color. So now it's completely transparent, and I can choose for each individual node or selection of nodes what I want to apply for each one. So for example, I could hold shift and drag over a couple of these nodes, deselect everyone, select one. Oh, sorry. Let's try that again. Drag, holding shift and dragging to select multiple nodes. And once I've selected these three, for example, I can give it a white color. And this might be a bit much, so I can probably lower the opacity a bit, or I can only choose the edges of my glare here, choose this corner, and choose this node, and then lower the opacity of those, so it remains more obvious in the center node there. And if I click off of this graphic, you can see now I've got a glare right there. And I can maybe, if I want to, I could just choose some different nodes, or I could just rotate this a bit to get the effect and the orientation that I want. Now this looks a bit better if I do a little one on the opposite side. So I can choose my mesh tool here again, bring up the meshes, and then I might choose, maybe drag over this node here, make that white, and I can lower the opacity of that one a bit. Now you see I accidentally, for some reason, I selected this node as well, so let me just Control C to undo that. Now deselect all nodes, and then I'm going to drag over this node only. Select white, maybe lower the opacity a bit, and that looks pretty good right there. So you can control where you want the glare, what color, and how intense you want it to be. And depending on your orientation, where the light source is, where you have your reflections, this can look pretty convincing as far as effects go. Now, if I just take this a step further, grab the reflections I just made, duplicate them, drag them down a bit, select the background I have, and duplicate that one as well, just to have some contrast. Lower this a bit. If you don't want to have the constant white edge around like you have here, it might not fit your aesthetic. It might be a bit much. You can do the same thing but more controllable using that exact same mesh. So if I just look at the nodes here again by selecting this tool and clicking on my graphic, we get the nodes from before. This time I want to address the outermost nodes to get that corner, not corner, but the edge reflection there. So I can hold shift and click and drag over some of these nodes, maybe half of the nodes out back like that, and then I can just give it a white, and you see it creates this same corner, like edge effect, but only where I want it instead of all the way around. And just like the other nodes, I can choose how intense I want this to be. So maybe just a little bit. Deselect every node, reselect the graphic, and then maybe choosing 1, 2 nodes on the opposite side. Give that a white look as well, and probably lower the opacity a bit as well to make it a bit less glaring. And then if I click off everything, you can see I kind of get the same edge effect as above here, but it's more controllable. I have full control over the direction and orientation and intensity. So this can be really convincing as far as glass goes. Now the last thing I want to show is maybe you want some less rounded features. Maybe you want some simple speckles or some small area with just a little bit of reflection, or maybe you have a square light source or something that reflects off of a window or something, and you want some something that's not round. And that can be easily done as well in several ways. I'm just going to show a couple of them here. I'm going to duplicate these as well just for ease. And instead of manipulating the mesh here, I'm just going to use some simple circles. So if we grab the circle tool and create a circle, we can just make a little one like this. And you can tell by the opacity both in the side menu and the bottom here that it's about 40%, which looks pretty good. We can simply take this, drag it onto our graphic, and maybe scale it down a little bit. And there we go. You can of course manipulate this further. You may blur it if you want to give it less intensity, or you can change the shape. If you want to create some more oblong shapes, you can use the Bezier pen. Take this and up in the shape choose ellipse. That will create, if you create a straight line like that, it'll give an ellipse. In actuality, it actually creates a path effect on the line. So if you open up the path effects menu, you can tell that it has different modes here, and yours by default should be on single stretched. That's what we want. And the width of the ellipse is dictated here. So if I lower this to something like 0.1, maybe 0.2, that's probably what I want. And the advantage of doing this is that you can use the edit path by nodes tool and then bend the new ellipse you made into the shape you want, and then you may rotate it until you're happy with the placement, and then you have another way of adding the glare. And again, you can lower the opacity, you can maybe change the blur on this a bit if that's what you want, and if that's the effect you need. Another little technique here is to simply take a very big circle like this maybe, and maybe make that even more transparent, maybe 20%, and simply orient it the way you want to. So maybe if the light comes from this direction, maybe you simply want that side to be a little lighter, and you can do this. We can take the center graphic, duplicate it, just make this another color so I can see what I'm doing, and then I'm going to select this and the transparent circle, and then I want to keep what's in between. So I choose intersection, and now I have just this area lit up. And if that's too much, you can of course adjust, maybe give it a gradient where you can tell by now that this side is white and this side is completely transparent. So this might be even more gradual and might be what you're looking for. So this is another way to give the appearance of a glass dome. Lastly, if you have some other custom shape that you need to have a reflection of, maybe you have like the example with the window from before, maybe you have a window, so I can create another shape that I want to bend around, and let's make this white, and let's make this 40% opacity. Let's say that this is my shape that I want to have reflected off this glass circle here. The way I could do that very easily is to have this selected and then go to my path effects, add a new path effect, and then choose bend, which gives me the option of editing this on canvas like this by clicking this button. I get the green handle here, or the line that I can drag and draw around. And when I have the effect that I want, I can use these nodes as well. when I have the effect that I want, maybe like this, I can just check that it works the way I want it. Not quite. Maybe make it a bit like so. When you're happy with the effect, you can just go to Path, Object to Path. And now this is finalized and you can put it onto your graphic. And that could also be the way you have reflections on your glass to convince other people that you actually have a piece of glass here. Now this is a bit much, maybe I will give this a blur like that. But those are some of the effects that I found works really well when you want to make some circular pieces of glass, have some reflections. In this case, I covered up a simple clock, but you could put anything beneath that. Uh, so I hope this helped someone to create the glass effect that you want. Bye.